So our reticle is an awesome tool. So learning the subtensions and the mill formula is what's coming up next on Into the Wind. I hope you like my face because we are going to be up and close today. So when we're doing these long range shots, our reticle isn't just a reference point of right in the middle, dial it, point it, and shoot. You can do it that way, but our reticle is a ruler and it gives us a lot of information if you know how to use it correctly. So we are going to get down to different types of reticles. Obviously, I can't cover every single reticle, so I'm going to cover a few of the basics, and then we're going to just jump right into it. So a reticle being a ruler, to use it correctly, we need to understand how to use it and what the subtensions are. This is something pretty much most reticles you buy, they're going to give you either a booklet or some sort of card, and it's going to give you the breakdown of the reticle and the subtensions. So I'm going to kind of go over that with you. Once we learn these, then we can learn the formulas and how to actually use our reticle. So this is our just kind of a very basic mill dot reticle. And so you're going to see north, east, south, and west. You're going to see we get 4 dots all the way across. At the very end, we get these darker lines, and all of these have a specific measurement to them. Certain reticles, they'll change it up just a little bit, but this is just kind of your basic mill reticle. So each one of these dots, so if we go from center of the reticle to the center of one dot, just like I show here, that equals 1 mil. And we can get 1 mil in a couple different places. So right up here, center to center, so I just wrote it as 2 squared. So if we go to the center of one dot to the center of one of our other dots, that equals 1 mil. We can also go to the bottom of one to the bottom of our next, that also equals 1 mil. And then we can go from top to top, from one to the other, and that also equals 1 mil. So some of the other subtensions is our dots. So our dots is right up here. If we go from top of one dot to the bottom of that same dot, that equals 0.2 mils. Now there are different reticles where you'll get some ovals. I'll get into that in a little bit. But from the bottom of one dot to the top of our next dot gives us 0.8 mils. So bottom to top, 0.8. Typically, once we go center all the way to the first, right to that black line is 0.5, and that goes the same north, east, south, and west. If we go to the top of one dot to the bottom of our next dot, that's going to equal 1.2 mils. And then if we go to our center of one dot to the bottom of the next dot, that's 1.1 mil. Now, typically breaking things in half is fairly easy for our eye. So if we take our 0.2 mil dot and we just break that in half, we get 0.1. So we get a lot of range with this. So we can do 1, obviously 2, 0.1, 0.2, 8, 1.1, 1.2, and then of course 1, and then your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 mils, and then all the way out. Obviously, if we go up and down, we get a full 10 mils, and then east and west 10 mils as well. So we got a lot of range with this reticle. Now, it's fairly simple again to break things in half. So if we go from the center of one to halfway, which is typically pretty easy to see, then we get 0.5. Now there is an update to this reticle, and we'll go over that next. So I am not a very good artist, so I know that this looks terrible, but it's to give you an explanation. So just like the mill dot, what these are supposed to be is diamonds. So this reticle even though it is a horrible example, horrible drawing of it, this is the reticle you see in the SWFA SS mill quad. So this is supposed to be the mill quad. So that's definitely one reticle that I like pretty good. But basically what this does, it gives us a little bit more refined over the mill dots. So a little bit better than the mill dots. They do give you the upgraded to the mill dot is the half hash marks, the 0.5 marks. And some of those mill dots also they'll do an oval, which long ways the oval should be 0.3, and then the short way should be 0.2 mils. That's pretty much exactly what this is, except that it's diamonds instead of ovals. So if we take, let's see, we'll do our diamond long ways, and then do it top ways. So our diamond long ways, again, not the best artist. I'm sorry, short ways is going to equal 0.2 mils. Now, if we do it long ways, that gives us 0.3. So it gives us a little bit extra on the 0.3. And everything else is the same. So from center to the center of our first diamond is 0.1. We've got our 0.5 hash marks, and then we can get all the way down to 0.2 and 0.1. And then if we go all the way to the end, I think this is the same north, east, south, and west, all the way to the end, it breaks it down into 0.2, going from the outside of the diamond to the first line, 0.2 all the way down. And then we do have at the very end the half diamond. If we go from the outer side to the inner, it actually breaks it down to 0.1. So we can go 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. I believe that our half hash marks, I believe those are 0.4. And then of course we can use in our reticle 0.5, and we can really break it down and define that pretty good. Unfortunately, again, not a very good artist, but hopefully that gives you a general idea. I know that that is a terrible drawing. So let's look at one more reticle. Okay, again, another terrible drawing, but to date, this is my favorite reticle. This one's by Vortex. It's the EBR1C. So there's a bunch of different reticles. Some of them, they got updates to this one. I think EBR7C, I think is kind of where they're at now. And it's going to have this Christmas tree type thing with a bunch of dots. Again, me personally, I just like a fairly plain reticle. I don't like a whole bunch of stuff down here. I've used one before, and it wasn't necessary. I thought it would be too busy. It wasn't, so busy that it distracted me, but I don't necessarily need all the dots at the bottom. I just like, fairly simple. Now there's several different reasons why this one's my favorite reticle. First, it gives us our half hash marks, 0.5. It gives us our full mil marks of 1 mil. The other thing is the line here, actually our reticle line has a measurement to it of 0.05. Our 0.5 hash mil marks are 0.2, and then our full mil marks are 0.4. One of the good things that, again, like I mentioned, and that going south, every mil is actually marked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you can fairly easily get kind of lost. So it's really nice to have those. And then of course, east and west, they're marked every 2. So 2, 4, 6, and then 8. And I think it actually goes all the way to 10. I think we get 10, and then there's an extra towards the bottom. So it's like 10 or 15 mils south. And then again, we get like 10 north. So we can use our entire spectrum basically in our reticle. The other good thing is all the way out here to the end, and the same thing, north, east, south, and west, is it actually breaks it down into 0.1s for our last 4 mils. So basically it gives us 4 complete mils broken down into 0.1 increments, which is really nice. So we can get, all the way down to 1s. We can use the little ones for 2s, 3s, 4s. I mean, it gives us pretty much the entire spectrum, which is really, really nice. Specifically for the scope, it is the Vortex Razor Gen 2. which is, of all the scopes that I've tried, it is my favorite one. And it's also an illuminated reticle, and just my favorite. It's really, really nice to use, really easily broken down, really simple. Again, that's why my favorite. Actually, I got, if anyone cares, I actually got a kind of a general tattoo of that same reticle because I liked it so much. Now that we kind of have a basic understanding of our reticle, every reticle might be just a little bit different. I think on the SWFA, our crosshair, that line is actually 0.06. Now I don't ever really use that specifically to mill a target, but we do still have that. So there's a little bit differences. Definitely look up the subtensions for your specific reticle. And again, if you have like the Christmas tree one, each one of those they may have different measurements on that. Typically it's gonna be your 0.2, and then you'll get a bigger one for 0.5, and it just works its way out for wind holds and holdover stuff like that. So definitely do the little bit of research, and then memorize your scope memorize your reticle, because this will be super important. So now let's move on to, now that we have a basic understanding of how to actually use our reticle. So let's talk about how to actually use our reticle. So first and foremost, because it's a ruler, the easiest thing, because we're going to get into zeroing our scope in the next video, what we can do is basically we can actually use these marks and tell us exactly what to dial in to our reticle to zero our scope. So let's say we'll just randomly put a dot. Let's say right here. Say we bore sighted our rifle. We take a shot, and our shot is 1 mil low and 1.5 mils to the right. So what that tells us is that we need to come up 1 mil and we need to come left 1.5 mils. And if we do everything exactly that, then our next impact, everything being equal, we're going to be perfectly in the center. So this is going to work regardless if you have mils or MOA. This all works the same way, if you have a first focal plane. Now, if you have a second focal plane, again, like I said before, you're gonna have to be on the exact magnification where everything is equally correct of whatever. So 1 MOA equals 1 MOA at that magnification. With the first focal planes, any magnification works, which is why I recommend first focal plane. But again, very simple as far as that goes. So as far as our second and third shots, or follow-up shots, all you got to do is see where the impact is, and then you can either dial it or you can hold over. So let's do this again. Let's say we get our first impact. Let's say we're shooting at 500 yards, and we see that our impact, even though we're on target, let's just imagine we're on target. We're 1 mil low and 1.5 to the right. We can actually just imagine that there is a mark there, and we can just hold where that mark is. We don't have to dial. We just move our scope up and over, and our second shot, and it's going to be perfectly on target. So you can either dial it or you can do a holdover. So again, like I said, I prefer a more simple reticle like this. I can do this fairly easy, but that's where, when you start getting the Christmas tree type reticles, that those dots already exist. So you can see right where that dot is, and you can easily aim right on that dot, or use that dot as your aiming point, and then make that follow-up shot. So now let's get into the mil formula. So the good thing, and you can do this on either MOA or on mils. Again, I prefer mils, but I measure things the way I want my formula to work out is my target size in inches, and then I want to get my answer in yards. So that gives us a constant. So we can do the same thing with centimeters to meters. You can do, feet to yards. There's multiple formulas. You can actually look up all those formulas if you go to my website, the overwatch.wix site, and just go to formulas. All the formulas are on there, and you can make the decision, what it is you are used to. So if you're in a different country, or if you use centimeters or inches or feet, whatever you like, there's a formula for it. So that's why a lot of people say, if you think in centimeters or meters, go with mil. Why it's not necessarily correct, because we can use inches just fine. So here's our formula. So it's going to be inches times, so inches to yards is what we want. So our constant is 27.77. So the formula is inches times 27.77 divided by how many mils that we measured our target. So in this example, let's say we've got, let's say our target is 10 inches and we measure our target at 0.5 mils. So we'll say we got a fairly small target we're shooting, and we're right here at the 0.5 mil mark. So we're going to do 10 times 27.77 divided by what we see in our scope, which is 0.5. And that's going to give us an answer of 555 yards. So on your scope with your ballistic calculator, whatever it is you're going to use, you're going to dial that up, that correction, and then you're going to make your shot. So the other thing, we can look at another example. 10-inch target, same thing. 10 times 27.77. Let's say it's actually 0.4. We measure at 0.4. Remember, our hash marks here have a certain measurement to them. So on this one, the small one was 0.2, the large ones are 0.4, so we can get pretty exact on that. So if it's 0.4, 10 times 27.77 times 0.4 equals 694. So that gives us our range, 694 yards. Again, we'll make that, we'll dial that in our scope, or if you choose to hold over, and then you're gonna make your shot. Now, when you get down to the small targets at longer distances, it can be very difficult to tell. Usually 0.1 to increments are fairly easy, but it does get a little bit more tough. But what's really, really hard is the 0.05. So, if you're just a little bit over, under 0.45, if you're a little bit under 0.5, but you're a little bit over 0.4, it can be very difficult to tell. So you're in that 0.0 something mark. So what we can do, and here's an example. If we were to, let's say we have a target that's at 0.5, but we actually ranged it, made a mistake, or we thought it was 0.4, it's going to be a difference of 139 yards. So being that we're somewhere between 555 and 964 yards, we're going to probably miss that target because we have an error of 139 yards. So usually what I would do in that situation is I would pull out my rangefinder, but if you don't have a rangefinder, the best thing we can really do is just try to divide that in half. So if we were to do 10 times 27.77 divided by 0.45, that would give us an answer of 617 yards. So kind of put it right in half. And if we made a mistake in there somewhere, it's a difference of 62 yards versus 139 yards. So our error is going to be much less. So it gives us a higher probability of actually making impact on target. And then, of course, if you still miss, you can just hold over where you see the impact and do a follow-up shot. So we can definitely go without a rangefinder, but once you start getting into that 500 and 600 yards, you're either going to need a larger target, or you just need to practice and get very familiar and get a really good eye on those smaller increments, which can be very difficult. With that being said, if this is something that you really want to look into, that's where you need to do some research on your reticle. Just like on my favorite reticle, the the EBR1C, it does have those hash marks all the way out here down to 0.1, which makes it a lot more, easier. Makes it easier to do those mil ranges. Now this formula is going to work out as far as your eye is good at seeing those differences. I would say on average somewhere between, probably out to about 600 yards, where you can get, good shots on, let's say, game animals, whether they're four-legged or two-legged or whatever it is you're shooting at. If you're in a military application or something like that, you're going to have a larger target, so it's going to be, you're going to have a little bit more room for error, but we really want to focus on precision. So if you're in that area where you can't tell if it's, 0.4, 0.45, you may just want to either move closer or don't take the shot. Obviously, most of the time my shooting is at steel targets, so I can take the shot and I'm good to go. Or again, we use our rangefinder. So pretty much every time I go out to the range, I know about what because I set up my target, so I know about what range I'm at. But I usually always start out with running through this once or twice. And the other thing we can do is we can actually, so you can measure this up and down and you'll get the distance, or you can measure it side to side. So I will typically do both just to run through the mill formula and keep my skill set, as far as this goes, sharp. And that's pretty much how every range day starts out, is running through this, once or twice. Okay, so regardless if we're using MOA or mills, there's a formula for everything that we need. So I just got a couple up here. I'm not going to go over every single one, but the one I like to use again is inches to yards. So the first one, obviously, inches to yards is the size of our target. So the size of our target in inches and our distance in yards. That constant is 27.77. So the formula is the same. So we're going to multiply and by our constant, and then divide by either our mills or our MOA. So if we need yards to yards, then we're going to multiply by 1,000. If you want to do centimeters to meters, now this is for mills. If we want to do centimeters to meters, we're going to multiply by 10. And then if we want to do inches to meters, we are going to multiply by 25.4. So the two most common ones on those for me, obviously, is the one I use, 27.77. But I know some people do refer to a lot of things in the shooting community to meters, even though we're in the US. I don't know meters super well. So using 27.77 and then also knowing the 25.4 is very useful. Now, if we have MOA, I've only got two up here, but there's several other ones. But again, if we have a MOA reticle, if we want inches to yards, we're going to multiply by 95.5, so fairly easy to remember. If we want inches to meters, then we're going to multiply by 87.3. So I think those are probably the two most common ones as far as MOA goes. But again, if you want to do centimeters to yards or centimeters to meters, there's formulas for those. And again, those are on my website. So I think that is it for this video. I hope this is useful. So further on down the line, we are going to get into a little bit more math as far as what we need to do. And this is one thing, I've taken several people out and showed them some, shooting techniques and showed them some stuff. And they had, as far as long range, they weren't very knowledgeable. They had an MOA scope. So I had to basically do a pretty good estimation off of my data, convert it to MOA, and then give them that data and kind of go from there. So knowing this stuff is very useful, especially if you're going to be trying to teach somebody else, or if you have a friend coming along that absolutely knows nothing. So it is very useful. So this is something that you definitely want to memorize. In a situation like I've ran into before, using inches and meters, I've had several people that referred to in meters. And again, I'm like, I don't know exactly what, the meters are. I know it in yards. I can use this and get it in meters and then do a calculation. That way we can still speak that same language. So that's it for this one. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next video.